Few. Okay, folks, good afternoon and welcome to our first afternoon session of the 17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. I think we got off to a decent start this morning. We heard from our SG and the Internet organizations and reports from our regional Internet Governance Forum in Trinidad and Tobago and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and also from the UNIGF and other opportunities for participation. This afternoon, per the provisional agenda, we'll kind of be getting down to brass tacks a bit, doing some workshop activity and looking specifically at our Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework document. Prior to that, though, we are going to start looking at data sets and the availability of data and use of data in recent times. And this afternoon, one of the workshop sessions, in fact, will be talking about how do we develop appropriate measurements and data sets for our regional internet development and research. So to get us going off this afternoon, we'll begin with a presentation being provided by Facebook. Facebook has an initiative that they call Data for Good. And they have work that they've been doing in collecting, creating, and making available data sets for different purposes. One area that is very Caribbean relates to disaster preparedness and response. And the presenter from Facebook this afternoon, Mr. Omari Seifu, he is their public policy associate research manager for this Data for Good initiative at Facebook. But his specialty in this Data for Good area is also related to disaster response. And he is coming to give us information on the overall initiative and to describe some of the practical applications to which it has already been put for our consideration. These are things that we could take into account when considering policies related to internet governance and internet management in the region. So without further ado, I will invite now Mr. Omari Seifu, Public Policy Associate Research Manager at Facebook, to make his presentation. Omari, please go ahead.
Great, thanks for the great introduction, Nigel. And I'm just really happy to be here and join you all and share a little bit about our program. Just as a kind of introduction myself, my name is Omari Seifu. I'm an associate research manager on the Facebook Data for Good team. I'll share a little bit about the program. To Nigel's point, I previously was with the American Red Cross and worked in healthcare, doing kind of geospatial statistics and work using geospatial data sets. So kind of have a lot of history working with disaster response and kind of health related topics. So we'll talk about that today. I can share my screen. I'll take you through a little bit about our program, and of course invite participants to ask questions during the time that I think we have about 10 minutes afterwards to ask questions and really just get into a bit of a discussion as well. So yeah, you heard my introduction. I sit within a team at Facebook called Data for Good. The mission of this team is to produce data products that help solve humanitarian issues. Particularly, we started in a kind of bread and butter of our work has been around disaster response for a good number of years. With COVID, of course, and kind of this resurgence of this pandemic, we've pivoted and kind of began to produce data sets that are applicable for managing this global pandemic. And think as we've gone on, we've started to get into areas around economic recovery, water and sanitation, connectivity. It's a pretty wide and encompassing project as we've gone forward. So I'll take you through a few of the areas that we focus on and kind of sub areas within our Data for Good program. One is a program called Match for Good. This is actually where I sit within our program. This is the program in which we essentially find and collect data sets within Facebook that have applicability to often either researchers or NGOs. And we find data sets, and essentially most of these data sets are geospatial data sets and can be represented in some way on a map. So like I said, we make these data sets available either to researchers and NGOs, but also increasingly we make research or data sets available publicly. We have another program called Surveys for Good, where we kind of use the reach of Facebook and kind of the penetration of Facebook throughout the world to deliver surveys in partnership with research institutions. So essentially, you can imagine a lot of people use Facebook to present a link to a survey that's hosted by a research institution. Can just create a huge amount of impact and ability to collect information in a privacy-preserving way that have applicability to our our humanitarian picture. I'll talk a little bit about both of these areas. And an area that I won't talk about, but I'll just definitely invite you to explore a little bit on our website, is Insights for Impact. This is a bit of like a smaller scale program, but like much more very high impact, where essentially we partner with an organization that has a particular issue area. Think about vaccination or perhaps like bed nets and malaria. And they partner with the organization to understand the public conversation about this issue area. They design an ad campaign that's essentially intended to influence behavior, and then they use marketing science tools to essentially understand the effects of those ads on the viewed population. So taken all together, this kind of presents like a really interesting kind of multi-pronged framework to essentially understand kind of phenomena in the world, understand perception perception of issues and perception of just kind of the state of the world at a really large scale, and then a venue for essentially designing campaigns using ad credits donated by Facebook through like I said, partner organizations to really understand and kind of actually begin to influence and put pressure on some of these issues. So kind of going forward, and I'll speak a little bit more about, I'll spend some time on kind of our work within natural disaster response and some of our survey work. And then of course, happy to answer questions and go into more detail as necessary. But our work within natural disaster response is one of the core areas and one of the oldest areas within our program. We produce a bunch of different data sets that are essentially designed to understand population movement and connectivity in times of crises. And the general framework of how these products work is that we take a measurement. We activate this program whenever there's a safety check on the Facebook platform. So whenever users are prompted with this ask for, are you safe or not? This actually generates and kicks off our internal process to create these data sets kind of automatically. So all these data sets are produced essentially to inform and supplement the work that natural disaster and disaster responders are doing in their field. So kind of just to give a good example and kind of a relevant example, the recent volcanic eruption in St. Vincent was a huge event where essentially there was a lot of population movement and a lot of dynamic kind of factors going in. And of course, if you overlay COVID on top, we had this really complex situation. So one of the areas that we were able to kind of contribute and work with a few partner organizations was one, we provide information about steady state population density. And this is a really key planning consideration for anyone trying to look at and understand the potential vulnerabilities or effects on the population. So we produce a data set called the high resolution population density data set. This is what's on this left side. This is we call it high resolution because it's at a 30 by 30 meter resolution and it's detections of settlements and human created structures using essentially Facebook's work on computer vision and its ability to process and perform those computer vision classifications and algorithms on huge data sets. The source data set or source imagery for this data set is 1.6 petabytes of satellite imagery that we essentially perform detections on. And from that, we're able to essentially distribute and create a population density distribution and maps that reflect essentially the settlement of people within areas. These are really important for just understanding the lay of the land and kind of how people are distributed across the island. So in the case of St. Vincent, we see, of course, most people distributed towards the south of the island, and the eruption occurred in the north. So we can imagine that, if this, we can just understand perhaps the affected populations and how they potentially might move. On the right side, another set of data that we produce is called is movement and mobility data. So what you're looking at on the right side is it's kind of like a heat map where we essentially take a poll of the per little grid square, how many people do we typically see in a given area before the crisis event, before the eruption. So we take that as what we call a baseline, and then every day, and actually within 8-hour time increments, we make available a comparison of what we're seeing during the crisis event to that baseline. So what you're seeing here is in these northern areas, a decrease, a percentage decrease in population as compared to that baseline, which was reflective of evacuations of people fleeing ashfall and kind of the effects of the volcano. And you see decreases in the north, increases in the south, and these are pretty basic insights, but this helps really confirm for responders who are using this data the phenomena that they're seeing maybe anecdotally on the ground. So kind of to take this to another level, our partners at, this is some analysis that was done by our partners at Direct Relief. And the kind of the long and short of it is that they found that the allocation of shelters within St. Vincent were allocated based on their relationship to different neighborhoods. And that in their analysis, they found that essentially the allocation of these shelters was good in terms of like the steady state population, but the way that we were representing the population moving, there was a potential for overloading of shelters in certain areas, particularly towards the east side of the island. So through this kind of partnership, Facebook was able to provide this data. Direct Relief was able to produce this analyses, and then through their partnership and through their work with other local NGOs, but also government operators of these shelters, they were able to make recommendations that were really powerful. So that's kind of the kind of workflow that we hope to have with our partners and government. And of course, they use some of this data to actually direct the location of where they were distributing emergency supplies. And of course, we're all familiar with the tragic events in Haiti. We also produce connectivity data. Just kind of the long and short of this is that it really just helps responders understand where they should expect certain types of connectivity and where people will have access to be able to stay in contact with either their families or other people within the region. So greener areas where, at least on the August 18th, we saw high confidence in cellular connectivity. Redder areas where we saw a decrease in connectivity as compared to that baseline that I spoke about before. Another piece of analysis that was really it's kind of ongoing, kind of that came out of our analysis of Haiti data was this an understanding of how, given the earthquake's epicenter, we were able to confirm that people were evacuating not to somewhere like Port-au-Prince, somewhere far away, but they were staying very local. And that consideration is really important for responders who are trying to understand, how do I reach the most amount of people with a limited set of resources? So providing this data and kind of alongside connectivity data and that kind of, like I said, that population density data that kind of sets a baseline of where population is really helpful. So kind of changing gears a little bit to our work on surveys. So within our Surveys for Good program, we produce a survey, just a few surveys. The one I'll speak about today is called our COVID-19 Trends and Impact Survey. And the way this works is that we actually, Facebook uses its ability to and its reach to display a prompt for users to take a survey. When they click that prompt, they're taken to a website or a survey website run and operated by the University of Maryland or Carnegie Mellon University. So there's kind of this handoff where Facebook provides the link and then some waiting in a essentially a randomized ID for then Carnegie Mellon University to collect the data. And we kind of keep we kind of each play to our strengths. The researchers get the data, we provide a really really streamlined and wide cast net on collecting information about this pandemic. This survey started as a symptom survey, but has now evolved into asking questions about information about like vaccine hesitancy. So in this kind of example of some survey results, and we've been running this for a significant amount of time now. Essentially, we and this is looking at both Haiti and the United States. We find that in analyzing this data going back to the essentially the January 10th, we see in Haiti at least a pretty steady steady kind of plane of vaccine hesitancy, and that kind of reflects a general consensus within the island of just kind of skepticism of vaccines, and having this data on hand and being able to kind of have researchers make it available to research to other public health officials and policymakers can really help just understand the lay of the land to affect the change and kind of get vaccinations moving in a bit of a different way. And in comparison to the US, you see this kind of really, in the US at least, this very upward trend of vaccine hesitancy. So in comparing these two different regions, we can see that there's probably different public policy strategies that need to happen here. Perhaps in the US, it takes into account an uptick in misinformation. Perhaps there's different factors in place within Haiti. This kind of provides another avenue to explore that. And because it's a survey, we also have a bunch of there's follow-up questions as people answer these surveys. So the main reason for concern and hesitancy within Haiti are around safety. So there's a concern about side effects, and there's a concern, and the second highest concern is, just wanting to wait and see if it's safe after others have taken it. So understanding, like I said, understanding this and understanding this at scale and in comparison to others within the region is really important for policymakers, researchers, really just trying to make a better impact on this pandemic. A little bit about the survey itself. We received essentially about 75,000 plus responses per day globally, and it's constantly evolving. So I think as time goes on and the pandemic kind of changes, we'll add and remove survey questions that better reflect the needs of the research community and the public health community. So with that, I'll kind of close. I wanted to keep it very brief. I'm looking forward to questions, comments. These are only two sets of data, or two kind of slivers of our program. Like I said, we have information about economic recovery, other applications of our data sets when it comes to water and sanitation. And it's a really all-encompassing program. So I'm looking forward to engaging and answering any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Omari. Maybe I could kick off with one. In terms of the mapping ones though, could you clarify a little bit for me again, how the data is collected? What does it come from? Is it for example, tracking phones that have location services on?
Yes.
And yeah, or is it?
Yeah, happy to go. I'll give a little. Should have spent more time on that one. So any location, any of our data products that are derived from location data or kind of user location data they're sourced from a subset of the Facebook population. Those users who have opted in to, and it's an opt-in feature. It's not kind of on by default, and opt into the feature called location history, where essentially the phone reports back to Facebook the location of the user while they're using certain features of the Facebook app. So it's essentially Facebook app users who are enable this location history feature. We then take that data, aggregate it, and perform analysis on it to produce the maps in aggregate.
And I guess we need to trust that the data will be anonymized and not used to target any particular individual.
Right. So that's a really key point too. A part of this is also this really delicate balance of efficacy of the data set and then user privacy. And I think privacy by design is kind of built into our program from the get-go. So for example, within our population, the maps that I showed you, that are kind of highlighted squares of population density. Only users who are, if there's less than 10 users within a square, we actually drop the data completely from our data set. So this makes it challenging to use this data within very, very rural environments. But that's a trade-off that we have to make when we're talking about user privacy. We do a lot of other stuff around dropping small counts of data, of kind of when there's a tight cluster of data, doing some anonymization, spreading out the data across a larger area. So you get the directionality of the analysis, but you don't get the actual individual locations of people, for example. So there's a lot of kind of privacy engineering built into this as well, to make this work in a way that's safe for individuals.
And I guess I need to note as well that Facebook is not the only company that is processing data like this, right? Google, for example, has different Google data derived services as well that people can opt in or out of, and they use it for different purposes. I guess Facebook has branded theirs data for good, and it's a question of how much do we trust in the name. Well, let me open it to others as well to see if there are any other thoughts or questions that might want to be posed to Omari. You can either put a comment in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and if you raise your hand, it should become visible to us. Oh, and by the way, to my colleagues, I don't know if for the ones that might be following on streaming, whether we are checking to see whether there are any comments or questions coming from that side as well.
Yes, Nigel, I am checking.
Oh, you didn't see anything?
Not as yet. Nothing as yet.
Okay. Okay. I see two. I don't say it's just two questions, but there's a question on the chat certainly. How can an organization gain access to such data for analysis and planning?
Sure. So we have kind of two modalities of how we distribute data. Some are publicly available. So the example that I shared with St. Vincent, the population density data, the kind of white and black example on the left side, where that's actually a publicly available data set. It's hosted on the UN's Humanitarian Data Exchange, and we essentially we make it available publicly without license restrictions. We have a few data sets that are like that. Typically data sets that either have really stringent privacy protections kind of built in from the beginning, or that don't use any Facebook user data, and we're just providing processing power on top of computer vision algorithms or something like that. There are a class of data sets that are controlled access, and essentially an organization, if we have to sign a data license agreement between Facebook and the either research or NGO institution to have them gain access to this data set. We have about 400 partners who have signed agreements with us, and that kind of essentially allows us to share data. There's a few restrictions essentially around resharing of the raw data that as another layer of protection against unauthorized distribution of some of these data sets that can be sensitive as well.
All right, thank you. I saw Carlton Samuels had his hand up just now. I don't see it anymore. Carlton, did you still want to intervene? I don't know if it might be a permissions thing that he couldn't unmute, but while I wait, I see another question. Can the data sets collected be made available through open APIs to other developers?
Sure. So our publicly available data sets, because we are hosting them on either the UN's Humanitarian Data Exchange for the majority of them, we also host some on AWS open data sets. Both of those surfaces have their own APIs built into them. So the Humanitarian Data Exchange has a set of like APIs and like Python wrappers that essentially allow pretty easy access and programmatic access to the data sets. And of course, AWS Open Datasets has its own set of APIs and programmatic access. the controlled access data sets, we're still still trying to understand and kind of build those APIs internally. Right now, we have a data portal that we're essentially people can log in and download the data manually. We haven't built APIs for the controlled access data sets. That's kind of like I said, kind of plays into that same public versus controlled access framework that we used.
I want to ask my colleagues to allow Carlton to unmute, and I'll take just this. He also made a comment that on Amazon Web Services, the APIs here require secondary permission. So maybe that it might be something that we could take note of.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you for unmuting.
Yes.
The question I was going to ask was asked by the person before me, so that's why I stopped and said, okay.
Okay. All right. Very
to the
good.
extent that the AWS, I know about the AWS open data sets, but some of those data sets require secondary permission. And I wondered if the Facebook ones requires any secondary permission. Thank you.
Sure. As far as I understand, the data sets we host on AWS open data sets don't require any sort of secondary permission. I've done a lot of work on those, and I haven't seen the need for that. There's a flag. I think there's a no auth flag that you have to pass when using the API, but they should be available without any need for authentication.
All right, thanks. And the last one I'll take is on the chat. Zafir is asking approximately what percentage of Facebook users actually have that location history feature enabled, and approximately what percentage of the general population of Haiti has Facebook accounts. His thinking is basically how representative of the actual population is today.
Yes, that's a challenge that we've always been focused on and have been like struggling with for a little while. In the kind of work on that, we actually have a project ongoing now called we're essentially trying to build out a measure of representatives of our data sets without exposing some, like, at the same time, Facebook as a business, to exposing some like network, like Facebook penetration within a region is also a business concern for Facebook. So like essentially trying to communicate representatives without over communicating kind of aspects of the business. It's a challenge that we have to kind of work with. So in terms of kind of overall penetration of like the location history feature, overall it's about 10-ish%. So it's a subset of the population. It varies from region to region. Some areas have, some countries have really high penetration and pretty high usage of location history. Some are lower. So it kind of varies from country to country. I'm not sure for Haiti. I know it was a bit lower, and oftentimes, and part of our program is really keyed in on partnership with our data consuming partners. So as Directly, for example, is performing their analyses, we have a Slack group where we're talking about this, and if they're observing any sort of aberrations in the data that are indicative of representative issues, we can kind of be in conversation and kind of debug that as we go. So it's these data sets are part of a constellation of inputs to decision making, and we try to be really transparent about the limitations, especially in areas where there isn't either high mobile phone usage or has representative concerns. This is an equity issue as well. You don't want to only look at people who have access to phones and disregard people who perhaps don't using this data. So we're really sensitive about that. And like I said, there's a lot of effort being put into a project right now to quantify representativeness going forward.
Right. I see a comment from Yassine Kilari. I'm not quite sure if I understand. I don't know if you do Umari.
Yeah.
Facebook plus WS plus Insta plus other apps.
Yeah, so I think maybe it's like kind of is this data coming from Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram? I think yeah. Okay, got it. So yeah, it is. I like those acronyms. I'm working with it. Okay. This is only coming from Facebook users. The Facebook app, not Instagram, not WhatsApp. And like I said, the subset of those Facebook users.
Right. Okay. All right. Thanks. You see, that betrays my own limited use of the social media stuff. Other people could kind of figure out some of the shorthand, but not necessarily me. But let me say thank you very much, Omari. I think it was very interesting and good to know, in fact, that if I would say if Facebook is able to build confidence in its use of data in this way, it'll go a long way towards enhancing the adoption of these digital methods. I think in all industries, certainly the privacy is a big concern throughout. So I think if it can be shown that we can use data with integrity, essentially, people might be a little more open to offering it and making it available. So,
Completely. Yeah, thank you so much
for that. You are quite welcome to continue to participate in the forum, because it's an open forum essentially, but just we're focusing more on the Caribbean items. So we'll move ahead in our provisional agenda now, and actually we're getting into our first workshop session, which I'll just take a couple of minutes to set up. We're going to be looking at the Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework document. And let me just bring back up my slide here. Share screen. Right, so I'm just basically setting up the task that we are about to undertake. And we are going to be looking at the document, the Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework. What it is, it is a high-level policy advisory document. Right, that is something that we've developed over the years from the discussions here at the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. The CTU compiled it and first issued it in 2009 and subsequently updated it, as I said before. And it articulates a vision and mission for internet governance in the Caribbean. And importantly, it provides policy-making principles and guidelines for policy development. That's like guiding principles and that sort of thing. The heart of the document, though, is really in the next bullet point, where it identifies and focuses on internet governance areas of highest priority for Caribbean countries and provides some policy recommendations. And then, of course, we present it from time to time to the CTU hierarchy. So we go to the next slide. So this is basically the table of contents of the Internet Governance Policy Framework. As said, it articulates vision and mission and guiding principles, and those are dealt with in this chapter 2 of the document, and these are the various subheads under chapter 2, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4, covering all those things. Over the past couple of years in the CIGF, we've taken time in our workshop to review this part, the vision, mission, and so on. And we've come up with some refined formulations of the mission and vision. And we did those in plenary session, right? It was basically face-to-face meetings, although last year's own was the first virtual meeting that we had. But in a face-to-face initially in 2019, we made a lot of progress with respect to the vision and mission. And online last year, we went a little further and I think looked at as well the guiding principles. This year and this afternoon, we're starting to look basically at the heart of the document, which is this chapter 3, which looks specifically at the 6 strategic priority areas that we've identified, namely infrastructure for connectivity, the internet technical infrastructure, legal frameworks and enforcement, internet content development and management, public awareness and capacity building, and research. So essentially, the workshop this afternoon is going to be looking at this area late yesterday, I sent out an email to all registered participants to basically, you know, maybe take a look at some of the proposals that are in here. Consider which areas you might figure you have particular expertise or special interest in. And given that time was and is limited for us to undertake this activity, maybe what you could do is focus on that area and see what inputs you can contribute now to help us to review, update, refine some of the policy recommendations contained in these sections. Now, it's kind of dense work that needs to be undertaken, and we're not going to accomplish it in one short session in this CIGF. So this is why I took some time this morning to indicate that in addition, we have established on the CTU website a discussion forum in which comments on any aspect, in fact, of the policy framework document could be made. Let's just focus this afternoon, though, on Chapter 3 and the specific subsections therein. So the way I am proposing to proceed is that we spend the time given, we basically have in terms of schedule time up to 3:15. The plan is for us to use the breakout rooms feature of Zoom and do 3 breakouts. One breakout relating to infrastructure for connectivity, another breakout relating to internet technical infrastructure, and another breakout that will look at the recommendations related to legal frameworks and enforcement and internet content development. Well, I guess resource limitations were such that we didn't look to try to split the group up into too many groups for this particular purpose this afternoon. So we will work with the 3. If, however, persons might have looked at any of the other sub-chapters, say on public awareness, capacity building, and research, you're free to also make those inputs or comments to whatever group you eventually choose. So we are going to set up those 3 groups that I mentioned. One will focus on connectivity, the second on the internet tech infrastructure, and the third will look at both the legal frameworks and the content. Rodney will, I guess, facilitate the connectivity group. My other colleague, Junior McIntyre, will facilitate the internet technical infrastructure group, and I will do the legal frameworks and enforcement and internet content. Now, on the screens for you should come up an invitation to join a particular breakout group. So if you want to make a specific comment on the infrastructure section or related to infrastructure, you can join in the connectivity infrastructure group. If your speed is more in terms of the internet protocol and domain names and that sort of thing, you can join the internet technical infrastructure group. If you're more of a legal or content developer type of person, you can join the 3rd group. So we are asking that you self-assign to the group of your specific interest or expertise. And we will come back at 3 o'clock because it's approaching 2:10 now. You can come back at 3 o'clock for us to get some, I guess, some preliminary feedback from each of the groups before we actually close this particular workshop activity this afternoon at the scheduled 3:15. we can make available a little more time tomorrow. In fact, that will also give the group facilitators a little more time as well thereafter to maybe put the feedback together in a way that we could record and maybe revisit again tomorrow afternoon during or around the time that we schedule the open mics and general feedback. All right, so at this time, I think they've opened the what you call it, the breakout rooms, and we're asking you then to assign yourself to whichever breakout room you would like. I'm talking to my colleague now, Shani. I'm seeing on my screen breakout rooms in progress and a certain amount unassigned. So I'm assuming that the unassigned ones are the ones who know.
Yes, the unassigned participants have not joined the room as yet.
Ah, okay, yes. So so they need to scroll down, if anything. Right. Okay. Because I wasn't seeing the
the legal group.
The legal group will be the main room.
It'll be the main room. So you don't have to do anything. But if you want to join the connectivity group, for example, I'm going from my experience. I have a window open on my screen, which shows breakout rooms in progress. And I see my name as not joined, but if I scroll down to the bottom of that list, I see the opportunity to join the other two. So scroll down and you should see the opportunity for you to join either the infrastructure or the connectivity group or the technical infrastructure group, the internet technical infrastructure group. So it would be good for us to have a certain balance in the assignment, but we'll come back at 3 o'clock. So we'll schedule Shanae the breakout rooms to close at 3, or we'll just close them at 3.
Yes.
Right, and give them maybe notice 5 minutes before time and then at the time. All right. Again, not seeing a lot of people going into the internet technical infrastructure, so maybe I'll make a special appeal for persons to join that group.
Nigel?
Yes.
How many persons? I only have about 3 persons, just Albert and
right. So this is what I was just making a special appeal to some persons to join that group.
Okay.
But maybe I don't have too many.
I think, yeah, a lot of people undersigned, so I'm assuming the issues that they probably don't know how to join the groups, because both groups, the infrastructure and connectivity, just have about 1, 4, 5 persons.
They have 5 persons. We now have 4 in the internet infrastructure.
Yeah.
But most of
the people haven't joined. Yeah. But yeah. Okay, let me get back to the group and see.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all right. I think though that maybe most of our group is not technical. Maybe most of the persons on the Zoom are not technical.
Okay, great. So I'm getting.
But that might be the issue. Mm-hmm.
If anyone is having difficulty selecting their breakout room, just indicate which room you'd like to go to in the chat, and one of the hosts can assign you.
Yes, that's good. Okay, so what I'll do now is stop sharing here and switch to my other screen, or the document itself. Share this one. All right, well, it looks like I have a very large group following, so I therefore anticipate a lot of comments. Okay, let me see if I could make this of a size that is legible. Okay, what I have here is the relevant, what I have here is the relevant section of the document. Let me go to the top of the document so that we orient ourselves properly. For those of you who might never have seen it before, this is what the cover of the document looks like. A Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework. We don't profess it to be the only one. And this was the table of contents essentially I showed just now. And we are going to this section on legal frameworks and enforcement. All right, this section begins basically with a show saying, you know, some words about the general intent of the section. You want to regulate use and control misuse of internet resources, but you also want to protect the rights of users and content providers. Okay, so it goes on to list what were identified back in, well, as late as back in 2016 as key issues in this area of legal frameworks and enforcement. One key issue is, of course, what are the appropriate legal frameworks and enforcement to put into place as far as internet governance is concerned, and dispute resolution. This is typically a part of legal frameworks. And then there's also cybercrime. Now, I should mention that in this policy framework document generally, a decision was made to put cybercrime matters under legal and cybersecurity matters under internet technical infrastructure. Because, of course, cybersecurity things typically tend to be more technical measures, whereas cybercrime matters tend to be more legal. So we made that distinction at that point in time. So there will be some. I'm supposed to remember to start recording in this room. 1 second. How do I do that? Oh no, sorry. We already recording in this room because they have to remember to start recording in the breakout rooms. That's this. Okay. Yes. So cybercrime is another key issue, and finally certification. So we identified 4 issue areas under this matter of legal frameworks and enforcement. And I don't know the extent to which persons might have looked at this before right now, but we'll kind of just go through the individual areas, and we'll be open to take any comments that you might have. I think I'm on my own in this. No, I'm in the main room, so I might not be on my own, but I'll be taking a look to see if anyone raises hands or puts comments in the chat. But this will be an opportunity for persons to raise hand and maybe intervene. And I think I'm seeing Kevin. Yeah, please go ahead, Kevin. If you can unmute. Maybe I have to help you do that. I'm not sure if I can. Participants. Unmute. Okay, looks like I need a little help here.
Okay, hi.
Okay, good.
Good, the prompt just came up.
Yes.
Yes, hi, Nigel. If we could just go back up a bit to that opening narrative, right? I'm wondering if in hindsight, if it would be preferable to replace, instead of the idea of regulate, use and control, to think about ensuring good governance for the use and control of internet resources, etc. Simply because I feel as if we have been so attuned to the idea of regulation as a solution that understanding how internet policy and legal frameworks develop, that's still something that should be ingrained within our societies. And I say so from the perspective that I don't think we have a lot of challenges when it comes to defining substantive legal matters. What I do think is that the requisite policy work, which should be supported by data gathering and analysis, that is something that should meet this exercise. And based on that level of analysis, decisions could be made as to what should be put at primary legislation, what should be put at secondary legislation, what should be allowed through policy approaches, and of course, the various self and auto-regulatory mechanisms that support that. So in terms of some of those auto-regulatory, thinking of those community rules that you have for social media platforms and like, you don't necessarily need to regulate particular aspects in that environment. So that was just my first comment. And I mentioned something there which I feel should be reflected as well, which is the policy work that informs all of this. So really being able to develop policy capacity, and of course, this is tied into the next workshop that we're going to look at when we talk about measurements for development. I really feel as that should strongly inform the appropriateness or the proportionality of measures we would like to see at law and what we would like to see in other areas. And by other areas, I'm thinking not only law or policy to sanction, but law and policy to enable, to incentivize the development of particular industry. So for instance, you may want to set at policy the use of your CCTLD to promote a national brand, or you may want to set at policy, let me see, the uptake of encryption providers, various number of things, but it's just a step back before we get to regulate and law. I think should be included here.
So, all right, I'm sorry I didn't quite place where that second comment would impact. The second comment about the law and so on. The first one, I think I caught, ensure good governance instead of this kind of prescriptive language here, right? What other amendments are being suggested? Is it in this area? Oh, I'm muted. Sorry. No, not muted. Just a second. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I quickly hit mute out of politeness, but I couldn't unmute again. Right. So in this opening chapeau, certainly framing the idea of evidence-based policy and enabling policy, I think that could be one of these, what you call the overarching objectives that will go hand in hand with the safe and lawful use of the internet. So probably I have to.
The idea of.
Well, I don't want to dominate the discussion, so I'd love to hear probably the other views of other folks.
No, I'm taking all comments. So introducing the idea of say it again, please.
Evidence-based policy formulation as a driver for decisions on governance techniques, because governance techniques appear to me to be the high-level umbrella under which you may consider legislation, regulation, application of standards, etc.
Oh, and just to say, what I'm doing here is quite similar to methods we use to revise earlier versions. We've taken comments from persons on the floor and considered how to incorporate thoughts into the narrative, right? And if, for example, a comment might have come in that eventually we decided, that maybe there wasn't consensus on, the comment was still there and it was explained at a certain later date why it wasn't necessarily incorporated. So
there's one other idea that comes to mind, and forgive me if I haven't had a proper fresh look throughout the entire document. I just narrowed in this section. Right. I was wondering the emphasis on policy inclusion, where along the framework would that be appropriate? And policy inclusion referring to the participation, meaningful participation of Caribbean stakeholders in global spaces where decisions on internet governance are made, so that you have what you say, Caribbean considerations in place at the time of making those decisions. And an example of that would be the cost of new GTLDs, which may seem inaccessible to smaller type stakeholders as opposed to larger ones.
I'm thinking there's a section on awareness building and capacity building, awareness and capacity building, that we could probably put that in. And also, I realize that persons might not have been so well prepared for this type of activity. So I'm fully expecting comments right now from persons who might have taken a look, which would more than likely be the minority. But the opportunity is there in the online forum for people to submit comments hereafter, thereafter. So that would be a comment. Capacity building, let me just put that up top somewhere.
Policy inclusion as a finale, as a specific goal to work towards.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go back on mute now.
I didn't take a good place to put that comment, but I'll move it after. I just want to stay, I guess, more focused on this particular area.
Okay. Right.
So
I'm gonna mute now.
We need to introduce some words that introduce the idea of evidence-based policy formulation and manage the language here somewhat to use a more balanced formulation, like ensure good governance of use and so on, use and abuse. Okay, good. Any other comments in this part right now? Floor is open. Well, I'm saying floor is open. Could we make it such that everyone can unmute? Shani, if you're there.
Yes, they can do so now.
Okay, all right, thanks. Yeah, we are making it open. especially in this section, where it's a somewhat smaller group. All right, I'm not hearing any further comments, so I'll go on for the time being. When we make the appropriate changes, we'll kind of recirculate.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes, I'm hearing.
Not sure. Are you hearing me great?
Yes, I'm
Are
hearing.
you taking out the word enforcement, or you reposition it?
No.
Right.
Neither. Yeah, it's misleading. The comment that I put there is in the wrong place, you know, so it kind of just attached itself to enforcement, but nothing is happening with the word enforcement. At least nothing has been proposed to change the word enforcement at this point, right? Because we do have, under enforcement, we have stuff related to cybercrime, policies, recommendations related to cybercrime, for example, in this section.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. And this is just kind of a motherhood statement. We could recommend changes to that if necessary. So in the area of legal frameworks for use in, you know, to possibly govern legal frameworks relevant to internet governance, I should say. Some of the statements given here that as far as academic, and the policy recommendations also identify the institutions that we think have primary action responsibility. So we need to understand what exists. So we should examine, compare, document, analyze existing national strategies, initiatives, policies, and legislation, and make recommendations. So are our legal framework sufficient for the new digital economy? There should be some comprehensive study of these types of things. And we're saying that organizations like academic institutions, CTU, CARICOM Secretariat, and so on should be looking at these things, identifying gaps, shortcomings, things that need to be improved. But some substantial research does need to get done. All right, and then having done so, one needs to propose and support implementation of best practices for regional application. What works elsewhere in the world, for example? Right? Can we identify what might be applicable to the Caribbean? Do we need to amend provisions of treaties? Do we need to have self-regulation, or do we need to recommend self-regulation in certain industries? Or could it be as simple as codes of conduct in terms of using the internet? If these things are not sufficient, well, then maybe we get more into what are the existing laws that apply. In addition, a lot has changed even in the last 5 years with respect to the internet. So, and some of these statements might have been coming forward from earlier versions and not necessarily amended at the last reading. But maybe we know more now that we can point to, right? We need laws on things like child online protection. At the time we last did this, there was model policies and model legislation coming out of an ITU sponsored project for harmonizing regulations in the Caribbean called HIPCA. So one of the recommendations was very specific here, saying that we should assess these model legislations coming out of HIPCA to achieve harmonization of the legislative frameworks, right? And maybe appropriately adapt them as the case might be. Is that still relevant to a revision of this document today? Or are there other models other models that we can point to that might be more modern and appropriate for now? Anyone with knowledge or expertise in this area with respect to and here too we're talking about things like intellectual property and all those things. The other policy area specifically looked at what governments have to do to have legal infrastructure supportive of the conduct of e-transactions. And a lot of these do end up being stated in national ICT plans and getting enacted into law. Things about digital identity, authentication, e-payments, and so on. So as far as legal frameworks, these are the areas or approaches that we had identified back then, and we're open to further comment. Kevin, don't feel shy.
Thanks a lot, Nigel. Looking at this first recommendation, could you just scroll slightly up a bit?
Slightly up, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I like the idea of the identified lead actors. I'm just wondering if at this juncture, and I'm thinking compared to 2016 when we last looked at this, whether the national spaces shouldn't be more set to help identify what this policy / legislative agenda could look like. And I say national spaces where you have these spaces that are based on multi-stakeholder practices, where you have people who are in the day-to-day trenches of some of the digital issues and challenges they face, that they can itemize at a national level. What are some of those top challenges? So that helps with identifying and setting the ICT legislative agenda. Of course, when it comes to developing or trying to find solutions based on that and developing substantive legal provisions, that's where it will be useful to do the sort of comparative legal analyses and the consultancies that can help speak to legal provisions, and in particular, what would be best practice legally from around the world. But at first, I see that interaction of the national spaces alongside the data exercise to be critical to coming up with appropriate ICT agenda per se. And it helps in a situation where you have limited resources, know within a particular time frame what would be the top priorities of the national space to develop. So it's really a comment on the how, include that national space interaction there. It doesn't have to be that the national IGFs are automatically part of the policy formulation, but at some point, your entities with responsibility for formulating digital policy should seriously consider the outputs of the national IGF spaces in helping set up the national ICT legislative agenda. And of course, at each iteration, you will continue to have public consultations and the like. But setting the agenda, I think, is very useful to get it from the national communities.
Right. So your thinking here then is that maybe we should.
It's an adjustment to this how. So to this whole activity of examining, comparing, etc. And I know elsewhere we will talk about the awareness building, but it's really considering that now in 2021 compared to 2016, we have had a proliferation of national IGFs and their deliberations and what they identify should coincide with what will be set as a national legislative agenda. And I say national legislative agenda, I'm referring specifically as to what will be put forward as the digital laws to be passed before Parliament within a particular parliamentary cycle. Because it really is just to speak to the topicality and the relevance of the issues as people are facing them, as opposed to any other guesstimates that you may have from political leaders as to what may seem important to them, which may or may not be fully in tune with what a national internet community is facing.
Right. All right.
It's democratizing the the identification and decision-making part.
Right. Okay, I understand. This first paragraph, though, I suppose was looking more at the whole region. I'll see if we could consider whether we amend the statement a bit to take this thought into consideration, or whether we put it elsewhere. But it's noted. It's noted, so we'll find a way to incorporate it. I'm not hearing say any objections to the idea, so we'll leave it noted there for the time being. So having looked at, well, in terms of other policy recommendations related to the legal framework, governments are supposed to propose and support implementation of best practices for regional application. So that would be our like CTU member states kind of thing. When we see measures that we think would benefit the region, our member states could propose them to the full group, to the full regional group.
One other suggestion right now, I'm thinking where we speak about CARICOM CTU and the reference to HIPCA,
Yes.
we could probably think of what's happening currently right now with the 11th EDF, European Development Fund, to develop cybercrime capacities across the region. And those cybercrime capacities speak specifically to developing cybercrime legislation, modern legislation where there is a common approach to defining the offenses. There are some commonalities with how to achieve mutual legal assistance. It makes states more in line to accede to things like the Budapest Convention. So for me, because it is a sort of all-encompassing project that was like HIPCA, it did undertake a lot of legal and policy analysis of what exists to date. So the mixed match of computer misuse and more modern cybercrime laws. And now it's really a question of having the participating countries actually update and implement these modern laws. I think is useful to take note of that within this document.
But the model laws is something beyond the Budapest Convention.
So yes, it goes a little bit beyond the Budapest Convention. It really speaks to, well, the Budapest Convention will be the driver as to what we define as the substantive legal issues. So the attack to systems, the cyber-enabled attacks, which are the regular crimes that are amplified through information systems, and then the effect it has on electronic evidence. But this 11th EDF, yeah, I'm just going to drop a quick link in the chat. CARICOM impacts that is driving this process as we speak. Where did the chat module? Okay, here it is. So it's CARICOM impacts that is driving this project as we speak. And so far, it's an initiative from the European Development Fund that extends itself to CARIForum. And it's in that state that right now the Dominican Republic has taken off with updating some parts of their cyber security legislation, I would say, because they haven't recently touched cybercrime. They just recently promoted establishing a national CCERT at law. And I note that Belize as well is doing some things in this space. They're supposed to be touching e-trans, data sharing for public entities, and e-evidence. And I assume that they're going to modernize cybercrime as well based on this 11th EDF. And it's something open to all states to accede to this update of where they are with their cybercrime legislation.
Okay, just a second. I think we have to do a little research into it so that we can put the right wording.
Right.
Cybercrime legislation.
And of course, acceding to the Budapest Convention facilitates everything related to the actual legal assistance. The issue with the existing mutual legal assistance treaty system is the time that it takes for states to respond. Usually it takes, in practice, probably 6 months for a state to respond to one of these requests, by which time the whole question of evidence and such would have fallen through because of the environment that we find out. So that's where Budapest.
Yeah. Life goes, it's internet time we're talking about here now.
Exactly.
Not legal time. So as you see, I put that aspect of it where we, under cybercrime, this is the latest aspect you just mentioned, under cybercrime, as opposed to the general legal framework, you know. A part of the legal framework is having appropriate laws in place for electronic transactions, like listed here. We had made a very specific reference here to a UN General Assembly resolution, and this is kind of old now. I'm pretty certain that they probably have multiple, if not a UN General Assembly resolution, but multiple other references that might be a little more current and comprehensive for the purpose that's intended here. You know, we have data security, and this relates to data security, right? So, for example, one might say, thing here now, what do you call it? GDPR.
Yeah.
Right, because that is kind of becoming a de facto world standard. So I'll put a comment there related to just GDPR. I have to kind of review this just to make sure. Intellectual property rights, e-commerce, e-business, e-government. You could probably try to spell this out a little bit more rather than just say e-commerce, e-business, e-government, but well, who knows? In any case, this is not let me put a comment here, updated guidelines. We have to find some of these things. So what we're doing basically is, I guess, just seeing what jumps out at us. And it's pointing us here at CTU in, for example, as one stakeholder at areas where we need to do a little research to see what's the best way to incorporate some of these thoughts.
Excuse me, just while you put GDPR as a comment, I'm going to put in the chat as well the UNCITRAL model law on electronic transferable records. So that would be another standard that would be applicable to electronic transactions law. They call it the MLET or MLETR. And it just provides some clarity on a number of these substantive issues. It considers, for instance, transport and fintech, which again are more live issues that we have. So it just provides more legal clarity and prudence.
All right, I put them down there. So we'll have them to check those links, the links that you just offered. Right. Okay, good. Thanks for those references.
Nigel, Bevel here.
Yes,
just a question on the establish and maintain supportive legal infrastructure. I just want to make sure I'm clear in my mind about what it is attempting to communicate. Is it from the framework standpoint that we should be saying that we want to have or maintain some recommended best or model type legislative infrastructure for e-transactions? Because that's not coming across in the way that the top phrase is worded. And so I just wanted to be clear as to what we're trying to communicate there.
Yeah, basically what we're trying to communicate is, given that in terms of a digital economy, everything is not on paper anymore, it's electronic. We should have in place the appropriate legal framework to support this, That's
right.
What I want to say. And
right.
The establish means it's not in place, so we have to put it in place. And the maintain means that.
But is it I suppose what I'm getting at?
So it need to be refined on an ongoing basis.
So the it is a model legislation or a model legal framework, or the it is independent national legal frameworks, and we just maintain a library of it. That's what I'm trying to, I suppose, clarify.
No, okay, I understand. The it is whatever is appropriate to the national requirement, but the intention is that we would have harmonized the national requirements. You understand? So what should I say? In my experience, we could say, you could tell each and every country, and each and every country agrees that we need to have measures in place to cover all these things. Yes, and we're going to do it. But the actual implementation of it is going to be different from country to country because their laws are set up differently. You have to see what implications this new law will have for that other existing law, or some of the provisions that you want to put in this new law might already exist in a previously existing law and that sort of thing. So you can't create duplications or worse contradictions in law, right? So I'm saying that one would still have to do on an individual country basis the details of actual drafting and so on to give effect to this general desire to include provisions to cover all these areas.
Okay.
Right. So what should I say? It is more the, I guess this more looks at it on a national level. Each government has to look at putting in place the appropriate legal structure appropriate to its own circumstances to cover all these various areas.
Got it. Okay, so it is assuming a national reading of that statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. Well, we're really having fun because time is flying. 3 o'clock is almost here. So it's clear that this is a non-trivial exercise, and something that we have to continue doing as time goes on. Yes, I'm hearing someone, but I'm not sure.
Yes, hi, Nigel Agri here.
Yes, I agree.
I had similar thoughts to Beverly just now, where he asked about are we showing the region model A or B, or are we logging what the member states have done? I didn't get it clearly.
I'm not hearing it too clear. Are we showing the region what?
What models A or B that could be implemented in the respective region, or are we saying, asking the region to share what they have done for this particular subject matter?
I'm not sure we're doing either, to tell you the truth. What we're trying to establish here is what are the general provisions that each country should have in place to properly support, internet economies, or, I guess internet or digital economies, as the case might be, right? So we are at the level where we are, I guess, identifying the scope of things that have to be covered, right? We're not proposing or in a position to describe for any, say, specific country that this is exactly how you have to do it. But certainly what you do in your country should cover digital identity and digital authentication. You must have laws related to, appropriate laws related to e-payments. You must have laws related to data privacy and security, and so on. So, as I say, the intention here is not to craft model law or model legislation, but it's more to describe what the scope of our legislation should cover.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So basically that was the other thing. We kind of touched a little bit on cybercrime. Let me leave dispute resolution for a moment and come down on the cybercrime, since we are within 5 minutes of our proposed end time. And we'll see, we'll go back and hear if the other groups did better than us. So under cybercrime, it already had reference to the Budapest Convention. And Kevin gave us some information that in the 11th EDF here in CARICOM, that there are specific, or there are relevant considerations as well that we might want to take on board. Other things that were mentioned here, we should be facilitating, encouraging, and participating in national and international efforts to control and prosecute cybercrimes. Yes, and I suppose that would come from, accession to the Budapest Convention would help that. This long statement here basically talks about, or encourages, collaboration among relevant agencies, right? Building and enhancing collaboration among some of the main actors here, the OAS, the RIRs. I guess here now we can add in people like CARICOM Impacts and so on. And I think we're still good with that idea. We might try and simplify language somewhat. Continue and enhance support for the education of judicial and enforcement personnel in cybercrimes, and well, things like evidence laws and so on. So we'll have to bring that out. I think we still would support that, and we continue to work in that regard. In fact, I could give you a plug here, Kevin. There's next week on the 1st of September, there's to be a Caribbean Public Safety Forum, where law enforcement persons would gather, law enforcement and justice persons would gather to look at cybercrime and public safety type things on the internet. So we are definitely going to continue doing that, promote public awareness and support of cybercrime related activities. We just need to let people know, definitely. So beyond the we got one item beyond the Budapest Convention. After today, we can go to the online discussion forum, as I said, and keep the discussion going. And we will also, we meaning CTU, will also we also intend to post progressive updates on some of the language that are in here, hopefully to incorporate some of the thoughts that are coming through. The thing will close in a couple of minutes. We haven't been able to touch the content aspect of it yet, but I'm encouraging you all to take a look at the document, the policy framework again, at the sections, and return any comments you might have to us as regards updating or additions for our next edition. All right, so we'll keep in contact with you all as well when new postings have been made. We have what, let's say about 75 more seconds inside here. So I can take up maybe one or two other comments.
Comment for me, Nigel, this is Bevel. And it links to the panel discussion to follow. And I feel the time is really upon us to put a more emphatic section within the document, within the framework for data, research, measurement, analysis, and publication. As part of the, I suppose, more responsible maturing of the framework, and part of the enlisting of the efforts of not just member states, but stakeholder groups across the region to help with painting this fuller data-driven picture of where we are and where we're heading. I'm not sure how it is captured now, but I think that's one of the areas where we definitely could spend some time either over the next 2 days or subsequent, kind of fleshing out the research component, research, analysis, publication.
Right. Okay. Well, right now it's section 316. There is research there, so we could look at that to beef it up somewhat, I suppose, to include any of the additional thoughts that you might have.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Okay. See you back in the main room. Well, I guess everyone is joining back now.
This is the main room.
This is the main room, yes.
Thanks very much for that session, Nigel. I think it was very productive, very useful.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes.
Okay, are we all back now?
That time went by really fast, Nigel.
It did. That's what I was.
Our area was the largest, huh? So we weren't able to complete. We probably did the first two, well, 1 and 2 priority key areas, and then,
well, I'm sure it'll be a common story. But since you're talking, we could hear how things went with you all. You dealt with the internet technical infrastructure, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just. Oh, you have this is your screen shared here?
Yeah, I'll stop. Yeah.
All right. I don't think I need to share anyway. But I think we started the discussions focusing on internet exchange points. And anybody from the team, Claire or Daniel or anybody else, Albert, you can jump in. I think we started discussing IXPs, and we kind of focus on the issue of research networks. At least we started at that point. Research networks, research and education networks, and we were talking about the fact that CKLN was mentioned here as an important, an essential network or service that we need in the region in terms of connecting our institutions of learning intra-regionally and extra-regionally. And so we started to talk about, the fundamental issue really is not so much the networks, the physical networks connecting themselves, but the policy frameworks that exist around it, and the starting at the policy level. Are there policies? Is there an agreement in terms of at the heads of state level, the heads level? Is there a mandate? Is there a sort of a clarity on the need for research and educational networks, its benefits, and is that being driven from the top? So, and that also sparked discussions in terms of, some of the institutions that we do have now that exist, that probably share similar mandates, but there isn't a drive to share and connect among faculty, among institutions, etc., for share information, share data for research purposes. And so another thing that came up with regards to the IXPs would be, as it relates to the NRENs, research and educational networks, would be the fact that these, typical, I think that would have been, Albert, your comment. Albert, you want to share on it a bit?
Which one? I think I was talking too much in that group.
The thought slipped me there anyway, but I think you were talking about the NRENs and I can't recall exactly.
Well, one of the things that I mentioned is that, we need to look at the philosophical position of whether, we will go and start building our own thing. Correct. So that at the end, it's waiting as opposed to leveraging, a single interoperable internet. I think that was the point I had made in this particular case.
Yes.
So the question would be, what is the philosophical position?
Right, and we would have said that further to that at the point in time, we have to look at other networks. We have Clara, Red Clara. We have a number of research networks. What models exist out there? How do they present? What's the current architecture in terms of how they connect? And learn from that. Approaches may have evolved since then, and so forth. So we spoke a lot about IXPs. I know, Claire, if you want to add anything, you had a lot to say on IXPs.
Right, but okay. Was there? Were you able to identify whether any refinement of language or additional?
Well, at that point we just we took notes. And we have some recommendations, and of course we'll have to get back. But we have the audio.
Right. But not only that, we also have the online discussion forum, which we'd like people to register into and follow and put in your comments so that we can continue the work. Even after this particular event is done. Correct. Right.
I think there were some specific refinements for the next section, Junior.
Yes. Well, there would have been a few. So essentially, okay, so for the first section, IXPs, we said essentially we have to determine there is a void left coming out of the CKLN. But the issue of CKLN being defunct essentially now, and we need to look at a regional level. What agency would we need to provide support and at a national level as well as a regional level in terms of NRENs. Right, so moving forward, we had the other issue would have been internet numbering, resource allocation, and DNS management. Yeah, we had a number of things we identified there. We have all the IOGs and ICANN and all the organizations that we've been working. I think we agree that there is a common interest and there is that enthusiasm to work, and we have been working, laboring in the vineyards together. The issue is that all these recommendations we've put forward, we say there needs to be some action plan to take it forward. And we all agreed on the priority recommendations in general, but there needs to be, I think there was an excellent suggestion that was made by Albert in terms of a checklist. So should we have a checklist identified for, and I think that can go for all the infrastructure issues, a checklist of areas that we can measure, monitor in terms of performance, and we can present these areas to our ministers in a way that they can internalize it and they can communicate it and they can measure and they can hold their respective agencies, ministries, and departments accountable for implementation. And that came up especially as we were talking about IPv6 adoption and a number of issues, IXP, pairing IXPs, and a number of things that came out of there. So
what we'll do, Junior, is we'll put the I guess the comments on the side and in consolidating them, right? Probably present it tomorrow, please God. In total, all the feedback from all the groups, such that people will see what comments we've taken note of, and we'll use that to possibly refine some of the language in the document, right? And
okay, good.
That will kind of feed the next step of us sending it around for comments. Just for since I'm speaking, let me just show quickly what came out of some of the discussions we were having. All right, we will, in this section on legal frameworks enforcement, and we did get some comments here to introduce, maybe refine some of the language a bit, or introduce an idea of evidence-based policy development in the work here in terms of legal frameworks and enforcement. We got some recommended some additional data sources for us to look at or to research. There are specific projects related to legal frameworks going on in the 11th EDF right now in CARICOM. So we have to do a little research in terms of that. Some of the references we have in here, like HIPCA, might be out of date now. Or if not necessarily out of date, maybe we could find some more recent references that would be better to use in the document. We also got some other links to check to see if we could incorporate measures from that into here. So yeah, in the time given, it was basically just, say, identifying areas that needed to be where we needed some further research, and we'll take it forward from there to go ahead. On the cybercrime, for example, we wanted to incorporate relevant, right? This is the EDF aspect here. There is some special work going on cybercrime legislation. We didn't really get time to get into the content area, but comments were made that we should be looking at beefing up our research capabilities. You talked too about NRENs and research and education networks and all that. So I think that is a common theme that we kind of have coming out. In the time that's left, maybe I'd give Rodney an opportunity to talk a bit about what maybe they might have come up with in the first section related to infrastructure.
Sure, Nigel, if you can stop sharing, I'll share mine.
Yeah.
And I have actually, here we are, okay. Sent this to you as well. Okay. We did some marking up of the document. We have some very brilliant minds in the breakout room, the likes of Carlton Samuels and Michelle Marias and so on. So I just tried to capture their thoughts as we went on. So it was a very good and lively discussion. So just a few edits at the top, suggestions and so on. And that's where we see what we have highlighted. It is the intention to maybe relook at the wording to more or less word it more eloquently, but the substance is there. A lot of this here is wording. We agree is sort of a changing of the language a bit to be more precise. And for example, here we said that for where it says that the standards could be set, we suggested that we say set common regional standards.
You could probably zoom in a little more.
Yes. Sorry, I just enlarge it here. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Right, so where it says standards could be set, we just said, set common regional standards. It's more action oriented. So yeah. All right. And we also added, instead of speed, because we recognize that speed is almost constantly changing with this, as the technology advances. And so we wanted to speak more, our recommendations that we speak more about broadband experience as opposed to a specific speed. All right. 5 megs, 10 megs, what have you. Let's speak about what experience the customer has when accessing services.
It may be a little harder to define.
Well, we can be, maybe as we get further down to talk about, so there are things like quality of service and quality of experience that you could define and you can measure, right? Of course, you can measure speed too, but measuring speed, depending on what service is being accessed, may not tell you what the customer experience is. But it may meet the requirement in terms of speed, but not the, at the end of the day, it's really about the experience of the customer or the end user experience. Okay, so recognize the pivotal role of ICT in national development policy. So change the wording here as well. Rather than speak of development goals, we're saying recognize, not identify, acknowledge, because I think, well, yeah, it's more of a recognition at the national level of the role of ICT in national development policy and plans, and to provide support to encourage, incentivize investment in infrastructure development. All right. And we felt, I think there's a comment here as well, that we felt that this is ideally articulated in a national ICT plan and national broadband plan was a bit too prescriptive at this policy level. So, I mean, this is our recommendation. After we review collectively, you could determine. Right. But we're saying that this is at this level is a bit too prescriptive to say we need a plan, a national broadband and ICT plan. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And we also changed adequate for equitable and affordable local access capacity. Just some change in language here as well. Wording. I'll skip through that. We spoke about establish national quality of service standards and regional benchmarks to include service reliability, stability, availability, and complaint/resolution metrics. So we moved this complaints and resolution from, I think it was lower down under these performance reporting standards. Yes, it was, to include it in the QoS standards.
Is that a new point introduced there in yellow?
This was moved from below, and I think the intention was to re-look and adjust the language as well.
All right, fine.
Because I think this related to assure appropriate network redundancy. I think Kim was making a point in relation to network resilience. I think we wanted to focus more on network resilience rather than...
Yeah, we didn't use the term resilience too much at that time.
Right.
I think we more now.
So, right, the intention was to go back. In fact, I will just make a note here. Right. Yeah, I hope. Okay, so we made some changes here as well. Establish performance reporting standards for operators to capture consumer experience metrics. All right. I think part of it too was reordering. So we established the standards, then you require them to report on the standards, right? With no changes there. There's a comment here on this point in relation to governance infrastructure, because we got into legislation, policies, and structures, but there's a whole other section looking specifically at legislation and regulation. And the question is whether this is appropriately placed here or whether this whole point should go under that legislation.
Right.
So we understand that the legislation or the governance infrastructure will support the development of resilient infrastructure, but you're speaking specifically about legislation, policies, and structures, whether it should go under legislation and regulation.
We could consider it, definitely.
Right. So there's a comment there to that effect.
Yeah.
We remove CKLN, that's defunct.
Right.
So that was more of distance learning and telemedicine, yes. And this again, cosmetic change from government to public sector communications infrastructure to facilitate utilization of broadband. And that is as far as we got. I mean, there is scope for more discussion, like I said, but I don't know if any other members on the team wanted to add anything at this point, but that is the essence of our discussion in the short time frame.
That's fine. Actually, as I said, what I'll do is we'll put together all in one document and use that as the seed going forward for the discussions on the online forum.
Okay, and that's been shared with you already.
Yeah. All right, folks. I think we've started, and I think we've got a sense that there's a lot of work involved in this particular section, which is the heart of the document, actually. So we will have to assign appropriate resources and effort into getting it done in a reasonable time frame. So let me say thanks a lot for the inputs given, and we'll take it forward. The intention is to at least put them all together such that by tomorrow, please God, we could leave you all with what has come out of this particular session, and we go forward from there. So let's take the break. Let's not add on any time. We will resume back at 3:30. So we'll shorten the break. Let me just make sure my timing is correct in my head. Yes. We will resume back at 3:30 and into a second kind of workshop discussion session, looking at Caribbean Internet research, data, and measurement for development. All right, thanks. You could take a comfort break. See you in about 10 minutes.
Visitors become citizens of Caribbean Futurescape or CFS and are immersed in a fully interactive, technology-driven digital environment. A first in the Caribbean in which they are able to perform everyday tasks that have been enabled by information and communication technologies, often called ICT. As you enter the CFS digital ecosystem, your registration is confirmed by a facial recognition system or by entering your name. Once your identity has been verified, you are then issued an EID, a unique digital identity card, which grants access to all the services in the CFS and allows you to move seamlessly from one country to another. Citizens can access from any country all the important services they need to live their lives effortlessly and productively, such as education, health, and other government services, all done digitally. All the transactions undertaken are recorded digitally, and the CFS citizen will receive alerts sent to their mobile phones or digital devices confirming those transactions. The EID is a fundamental aspect for living in the future digital Caribbean, as it confirms your status in all the important areas of your life and allows freedom of movement. The EID will provide access to all the information regarding the citizens' interaction with their government and other governments in the Caribbean. Digital transformation brings endless possibilities. Here are some examples. Citizens process residential or commercial land transactions via the online land registry through the use of their EID at home or another territory. The classroom of the future is digital.
This digital classroom would allow students to access their homework, their assignments, their downloads, any syllabus that is required for the students to have access to, they will be able to access it here. So for a principal, they would have access to a dashboard that would allow them to see the monthly income, the expenses, the fees collection, as well as how many members of faculty that they have, and also how many students they have in the school.
And on the Parents Portal, parents can track information on their child and communicate with teachers directly.
If we were to implement this correctly, there'll be no more textbooks.
In this futuristic technology space, the digital library and creative skills are developed using different media. Apps and tools are available on the internet and are used to encourage and stimulate interest in music, dance, writing, sketching, and photography.
Welcome to the DIY Place. This is the place where we're looking at the future of education, and we're looking at using both technology and art and craft to enhance primary school education.
Children can borrow books, Kindles, and digital content from the library of the future. The courtroom and legal system are digital.
Courts tend to be very paper-based. You're going to be in a court here where all of the documents are electronic, where they're digitally signed, where there are no stamps and stamp duties. You're looking at a justice who is in an entirely different jurisdiction presiding over a local court. You can hold a legitimate court hearing using the internet and technology and fast track or accelerate the dispensation of justice. You can also look at situations where you have people who have difficulty accessing justice. They may not have access to a lawyer, and they can use the remote tools to access legal representation or to file documents without having to drive or to fly into a country or town or location to present documents before the court.
Medical service delivery is transformed. Technology allows citizens to make online appointments, provide insurance information, and pay for services via their EID. It allows practitioners to access patients' medical history at any medical facility. Here we see citizens of CFS making appointments, filling prescriptions, and accessing medical diagnostics. In the agricultural sector, all farm-related processes are monitored using advanced devices and robotics, from seed to market.
What we have standing here is an hydroponic system. It's an NFT system, and we are growing herbs and lettuce vertically with indoor lamps. We are monitoring our nutrition by our mobile phone. The lights can come out. It doesn't matter where you are, if you're standing here or at home or in another country. We can also do that with the pumps, where the room temperature, the temperature of our nutrition, and all this information we have stored in our computers. So at the end of the day, we can see exactly what happened.
At the heart of all these activities, a management operations center ensures the interoperability that enables the seamless provision of services. The center monitors, analyzes, and generates data intelligence in real time, which informs planning and decision-making. Here we see a small snapshot of some of the information that can be gathered and made available. We see the number of persons entering and exiting each country, the revenue collected in each country, the areas that generate the most income, and poll results of citizen satisfaction. Digital transformation will touch every part of our lives, affecting how we work, shop, travel, educate, govern, and even how we live. It will spark the creation of new business models and revenue streams. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence cloud computing, and the Internet of Things will accelerate transformation. Caribbean digital transformation, however, is not just about technology. It occurs at the intersection of people, governments, businesses, and technology, and is guided by the world around us. Governments and organizations, all of us must embrace technology to make the transformation real and our world fully digital.
All right, folks, good afternoon again, and welcome to the second workshop session of our 17th CIGF this afternoon. So in this session, we are going to hear from our dearly beloved internet organizations here in the Caribbean, ARIN, LACNIC, ISOC, and ICANN, talking about data developments. So I will hand this session over to the facilitator, Mr. Bevel Wooding, Director of Caribbean Affairs at ARIN. Bevel, all yours.
Thank you, Nigel. And good afternoon, everyone again. Good night for some of you.
Yes.
So this is our Internet Organization special panel on enhancing Caribbean Internet research, data, and measurement for development. And I have with me some familiar faces. We have Mr. Albert Daniels of ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, Mr. Shunan Osepa from the Internet Society, ISOC, and the bearded one, Mr. Kevon Swift of LACNIC. And what we want to do is have a conversation around some of the proposed collaborative approaches that the Internet organizations are taking to measure the development of the Internet in the Caribbean. And we want to share with you some of these activities because we believe, one, they're important, but two, that it cannot come to full fruition without the full participation of the Caribbean Internet governance community. And so by way of some context setting, over the past year, I think we've all recognized that both the government or the public sector and the private sector have had to make some extraordinary investments in information and communications technology. Much of these investments have been made with the promise, or in some cases, the blind faith and hope that there would be improvements in efficiencies, there would be access provided to persons who are without it, that these investments would facilitate greater levels of transparency and accountability, increase competitiveness, expand our markets, allow our businesses to continue operating and functioning, and of course, expand opportunities, including much needed job and employment opportunities for our citizens. And a lot of these promises would be very familiar to anyone in the technology arena, as they represent the long spoken, long promised hope of the information age and the digital economy. But when we look at these things in the context of where we are now in the Caribbean, recognize that these investments don't take place in a vacuum. The promise of technology can be easily compromised, whether consciously or unconsciously, by forces that are intent, for example, on maintaining the familiar or maintaining control or power that lives inside of the status quo. And whether these forces are inside of our institutions or in our national communities or at the regional level, or even if they come from outside of the region, their impact on Caribbean development is undeniable. And what we have been discussing in our conversations up to this point is that even though these forces play a part in how fast and how far we can move forward, they don't create some inevitable failure point where we will never achieve the goals that we have set for digital development in the region. So to resist and overcome these forces, we can consider this. We must be able to understand them. We must be able to manage their impact on the development agenda. But for us to understand and manage them, we have to actively seek to measure them and measure the factors and the attributes that contribute to all aspects of our digital development agenda. From some of the very obvious questions that many of us have: how many are connected? What is the quality of these connections? What's the level of digital literacy? What are the factors impeding accelerated digital transformation? Or what is the value of our digital economy? These are some of the obvious questions that have been and should be asked considering how we're going forward. But there are some less obvious questions and sometimes some overlooked issues, like how resilient are our networks? How secure are our applications? How efficient is our regional internet and domestic internet traffic exchange? What is the level of investment in human capacity building? And one of the most important questions, can the cost of inaction be quantified? If we do nothing, what does it cost us? Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of questions, but it is indicative of the kinds of inquiries that demand urgent national and regional answers. So if we say that for the Caribbean, social and economic development is now inextricably linked to issues of internet access, affordability, quality, and resilience, then we must invest time, energy, research effort to ensure that we are making informed leadership decisions and to ensure that we are optimally focusing scarce resources to tackle our development goals. And that's what the IORGs, or the internet organizations, have been discussing over the past several months. We recognize that there are unique challenges being faced by the territories within the region. And the representatives on this panel all have peculiar, unique perspectives into the, let's call it the cultural cauldron that shapes Caribbean mindsets and that shapes Caribbean opportunities. And we want to use this and our time together to share with you some initiatives in train that we hope will help address the data gap that exists in the region and its approach to internet governance. And I'm pleased to say now that these initiatives that we're about to share, some of them are works in progress, very much so, but they're all highly collaborative in nature. And they're all expected to bring tangible benefit in the short term and beyond to internet governance development and digital development, for that matter, in the Caribbean. So I hope this context helps you understand why we felt that this would have been an important discussion to bring to this year's Internet Governance Forum. And I'd like to ask my colleagues, starting with Kevon, to give an overview of the work being done at LACNIC, but also in collaboration with some of the other agencies represented here, so that you can get a sense of what's in play. And then from Kevon, we'll go to Albert, and from Albert to Shernan, and then I'll share some stuff that is happening on the ARIN, American Internet Registry front as well with you. Kevon?
Okay, thank you so very much, Bevel, for that introduction. I think I wanted to just focus my message, my intervention, on some key data sources that I think could be very relevant for everything that is network related here. And of course, as Bevel is saying, how can we leverage this sort of information, this data, to inform our decisions on building out Caribbean networks? So I'm just going to share this visual quickly to give you a sense. What I've called this, looking at three sources. I label it the sources for preparedness, benchmarking, and performance of networks. And the first source, of course, it deals directly with what we have on our website, what we monitor on a regular basis, LACNIC statistics.
Kevon, try swapping the view.
Okay. So earlier on, when excellent. I tried this, it knocked off a monitor and the mouse stopped working. So it was Murphy's Law in full effect. So I'm glad it's showing properly now. Right. So our very own LACNIC statistics, and I think some of the quintessential type measurements that you've come to hear from the RIRs, you'll find right in one source. And of course, when Bevel speaks to what measurements are captured by ARIN, you see a lot of similarities. Of notable mention would be our IPv6 penetration and allocation indices. And the penetration one in particular, based on two particular back-end systems, I'd say, Akamai, which of course is proprietary, and these are the Akamai networks, but also the open data available via Google, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Google Analytics and the concept of Google Hits, where you have trackable code that interacts every time based on users' behavior on a website, and that creates something called a hit, which is data that goes back to Google servers. So you can see in live this particular information source, the penetration rates across Latin America and Caribbean. What we tend to note at LACNIC anywhere where you have IPv6 available to the end user that goes above 1%, and there have been a number of economies for quite some time within the Caribbean region that have more than made the mark. Speaking here from Trinidad and Tobago, we are one of the top IPv6 deployment cases in the world, certainly within the top 2022 positions. There are some other useful metrics there, IPv6 within academia, the whole question of ASNs and being sure that you can acquire your own ASN is very relevant to the larger question of network autonomy and network resilience. And other issues such as the deployment of RKPI on a per country basis. So that's where we have at the LACNIC website, and that's why I call understanding metrics or using metrics to understand the preparedness of your network. The next source I wanted to highlight is what I would call the NRO. The NRO is a Numbering Resource Organization, which is basically the 5 RIRs coming together under alliance and giving you a global idea as to what is happening in the numbers community. And I put this source there for the purposes of what I call benchmarking. And it's always important when you're tracking your development at a per country level to understand what is happening along with other countries, but also in what you call comparator countries across the globe. So for the benchmarking purposes there on a quarterly basis, what you would find is that the NRO publishes statistics on the total number of IPv4s are managed, available IPv4 per RIR, and you may consider this probably a good sign or not. There's absolutely 0 available for the Caribbean, none at ARIN nor at LACNIC, which means that the whole question of IPv6 is something that has to be done strategically and now. That said, there is the possibility of gaining IPv4s between 4 or 5 of the RIRs through this whole question of transfers, and the NRO publications speak to intra-regional transfer, which would be the transfers within a particular RIR community or between one RIR and the next. Total allocated IPv6 and IPv6 assignments. And again, the question of ASNs, meaning the total figures, what is assigned on a yearly basis, and the differences between 16 and 32-bit ASNs. The last data source I wanted to speak about briefly deals with RIPE Atlas. And RIPE Atlas is an initiative coming out of the RIPE NCC, and it's very pertinent for us to understand the question of how networks perform. So this is an ongoing initiative that has been based on the deployment of probes and anchors across the entire globe. Even in past years, LACNIC, myself and others have been instrumental in getting these probes distributed across the Caribbean region, in particular in islands where there were no probes installed whatsoever. And through these probes, you have what you call these built-in measures that speak to some of the performance issues that are happening across our networks. And these built-in measures include ping, traceroute, DNS, NTP, and the like. The benefit or the advantage of Atlas is that you're also able to generate specific types of internet maps. And I've put some examples here that will be quite useful for our conversation as to what we should be tracking when it comes to the level of networks in the Caribbean. The performance of DNS root instances, root server copies across the region, that is something that could be generated through the Atlas project. And then you also have this concept of reachability of fixed destinations. So I'm going to stick a pin in there just as a reminder. 3 data sources that are useful and what I would consider to be 3 particular objectives are the LATNIC stats, where you will see similarities with ARIN stats in terms of the preparedness of our networks. The NRO quarterly publications, which are useful for benchmarking purposes across the world. And of course, RIPE Atlas that gives you more nitty-gritty details on the performance of specific networks. And ideally, what we will be able to do from this is to be able to actually capture specifically these network performance metrics from this particular region, and based on that, have future decisions informed on what would be possible future investments in this area. So I'm going to stop right there and hand it back over to you, Bevan.
Straight to Albert, actually.
Thank you very much, Bevel. I think the key message from ICANN, from a Caribbean perspective, looking at how we use data as a basis for making decisions with regard to the development of our networks, is that there are several existing reports, a lot of ongoing work in terms of determining the situation at a global level. But when it comes to viewing the Caribbean situation based on the data presented in these reports, there is a challenge because of the lack of decomposition all the way down to a Caribbean country level. So the point is, there are some reports available with what would generally be useful data, but for us in the Caribbean, it's difficult to use that data as it is not expressed by our different Caribbean territories. We know in the Caribbean, we have roughly about 32 territories, 16 independent territories and 16 overseas dependencies. And our aim is to start looking at these reports, start looking at how future reports are developed, and seeing what inputs we can make as Caribbean IOGs to ensure that at the end, we have data that is relevant to us in a very specific way. And I'd just like to go through some examples quickly. The first report that I would mention is a global domain name market report for 2020, which was published in June 2021, because we hear a lot about domain names and the domain name industry and so on. Now, the report itself seems to be a report that could be very useful. I mean, section 3 deals with global trends, the impact of the COVID shock, persistently contrasting performances, the strengthening of the positions of certain domain names. These headings would be useful if we could see them at a Caribbean level. And if we go further, looking at how CCTLDs have performed during COVID times, looking at the impact on COVID of regional dynamics on CCTLDs, and also looking at the investments that are being made in CCTLDs. And if we go further down into that same report, we see that there is some discussion and some data on the distribution of top-level domain names at 6.4, 6.5, the change in retention rate. Now, a retention rate from the perspective of a top-level domain manager is where they actually make their money. So if you have entities within the Caribbean who are looking to generate business activity and revenues based on domain names, they would be looking to retain as many registrants year after year by the collection of those registration fees and renewal fees. So if we could see what the retention rates are for different top-level domain names in different territories, then this would be very useful data. However, the data is available at a global level, but not at the level of our countries. And moving on a little bit, there is a topic titled The Reflections on the Business Models of CCTLDs. 672, the consequences in terms of marketing strategies. How do different markets perform based on the different marketing strategies that they use? How much information do we have on this? What can we learn from our colleagues in different territories? We don't have this data at the Caribbean level, but there are reports that has this data at a global level. 6.76, convincing investors. What do you need to do if you're running a CCTLD to get new investors to come and invest in your operation? I mean, what data do you need to have? What do we need to put together? So again, if we had this data, we could see greater successes in our region. And very interesting, 6.77, success or failure is linked not to volume, but to the pertinence of the strategy with respect to market conditions. Again, a very empirical study based on data that is collected from several areas with regard to domain names, where if we were able to have this data available for our Caribbean territories, then it would be quite useful and allow our business people in the Caribbean to make data-driven decisions based on the data that is available. Within ICANN, we have a division which is referred to as OCTO, O-C-T-O. An ICANN presentation would never be complete without at least one new acronym, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. And this particular office generates several reports. And I would just draw your attention to 2 or 3 of them. The first one is OCTO 19, which is described as the DNS Core Census. Now, the DNS Core Census covers a portion of global public DNS and is designed to enable useful and stable long-term measurements. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could have these useful and stable long-term measurements for our Caribbean region? And the situation is that the data is available at a very high level globally, but not for our individual Caribbean territories. And we're talking about data such as the percentage of top-level domains that have deployed DNSSEC. This essentially is a measure of how secure our internet infrastructure is across the board, because the implementation of DNSSEC is an indication of having a more secure transactional environment for doing transactions over the internet. How many of our countries have deployed DNSSEC? To what extent have they deployed it? This data we don't currently have in an easily analyzable format for our Caribbean territories. And if we go a little bit further, what we realize is that in section 1.3 of this particular document, there indicates that there is a good opportunity for our Caribbean to actually get involved in what is happening with the data. Because what we find is that there are organizations where we can have an input as a Caribbean, which will determine what the output of these kinds of reports actually end up looking like. And more specifically, we want an output that features our Caribbean territories. So when we look at the organizations that contribute to elements of the DNS Core Census, we have the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. I know many stakeholders from our Caribbean region participate in this particular organization. We have, of course, ICANN. Many of us actually participate in ICANN. We have the Number Resource Organization, which essentially comprises the regional internet registries. And of course, we are very active in the Caribbean in LACNIC and ARIN. We have the CCTLDs. You have organizations representing CCTLDs actually making inputs into this report, and also the Internet Architecture Board. So the point here is that we are in a position in the Caribbean to actually influence what the outputs of these reports look like and engage in activity where we can recommend that the data be decomposed by various topics as it relates to our individual territories. So there are several other reports, but in the interest of time, I won't go into all of them, but I think you get the picture. There are reports and there's ongoing work being done in terms of data collection by ICANN itself and also being commissioned by ICANN. And the point is that as a Caribbean, we need to make inputs into the design of the reporting from these analysis so that the data will be more useful to us. at the Caribbean. Bevel, I'll hand back over to you.
Thanks, Albert. And I just to keep everyone tracking where we're going with the discussion, you understand that there are existing reports that paint a particular perspective of the picture of the state of the internet generally, from which we could extrapolate or with some effort derive what's going on in the region. But what I hope you're hearing inside of this is there is work to be done, and the Caribbean has to participate in that work for us to get a truly clear picture of what is happening on Caribbean networks and on systems that rely on and depend on Caribbean networks and their availability and security. And so as we go around the panel, let's keep track of the types of data sets that already exist and the kinds of drilling down that still need to take place if we have to have a more comprehensive view of the state of our networks in the region. Next up, we have Shannon Osepa of Internet Society, and he's going to share with us some of the initiatives inside of ISOC that also relate to this subject.
Yes, thank you very much, Bevel. Let me just share one screen or one slide, basically. Yes, I think you can see it, right? So, yes, I think if you look what we have heard from all the other, let's say, presenters, my colleagues, my friends, you have been focusing on different, let's say, indicators. And what we are doing at the Internet Society, given that we are focusing on an open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy internet, all these indicators in one way or the other, we would like to categorize them in a given structure. So I would like to mention to you what are the categories that we're using when we are focusing on the indicators. The first one, for example, we are looking at the openness of the internet. So we would like to get a better understanding. Are there like internet shutdowns in a given country? I know, for example, in the Caribbean, that's not an issue, but we do have other parts of the world where that's a real issue. So in one way or the other, we would like to know what is going on with respect to the openness of the internet. Globally Connect, for example, in the previous section, we did focus, for example, on connectivity. This is one of the areas where we do focus as well. We would like to get a better understanding with respect to internet penetration, and not only, let's say, the internet penetration, number of IXPs, quality of service, quality of experience, as was mentioned in the previous section. We are focusing on how secure is the internet. Basically, what Albert did mention in one way or the other, and also Kevin, in one way or the other, they're looking at how secure is the internet. Trustworthy, one of the areas that normally, especially in the technical community, we don't focus much on, but that's the, let's say, on privacy, especially nowadays with COVID, everyone online, we need to make sure that privacy is being respected over the internet. So in a nutshell, basically what we're doing, we divide these four areas into smaller bites, and then we're looking at how we can get some very specific indicators that can give us an indication where the internet is heading in a given territory or region. In the Caribbean, we do have a few researchers as well. I've seen Michelle Marius online, and she's one of the key contributors, I think, in the Caribbean and also elsewhere. She has the so-called ICT Pulse, in which she is monitoring basically what we are doing in the Caribbean. And these are basically the indicators or reports that we would like to see that more people are focusing on. I know, for example, a couple of years ago with the same Michelle Marius, we did focus on a report with respect to the state of the internet in the Caribbean, and that back then we did look at 11 territories in the Caribbean to get a better sense how the Caribbean is performing. For example, Albert also did mention some reports, IATF, Internet Architecture Board. These are all, let's say, organizations that are affiliated with the Internet Society. And just a couple of, I think, let me just, yes, stop sharing my screen over here, yes. A couple of months ago, we, or the Internet Architecture Board, they did focus on, let's say, the COVID-19 and network impacts. Basically, they did look at 2020, and we have seen some very interesting, let's say, figures with respect to that that report. Those of you who would like to get a better understanding of that, that's the RFC 1975. So you can just Google that, and then you can get a better understanding with respect to the outcome of that report. But for example, what we have looked at is, for example, the overall traffic growth during the pandemic, changes in applications. Nowadays, all of us are online, so video conferences applications have grown with more than 200%. We also have looked, for example, at the mobile networks and their mobility. We have looked at what we call a much deeper look at interconnections and the increase of traffic, cloud platforms, and especially how secure they are, given that people are online nowadays. So you need to look, more people are using cloud systems, cloud platforms, so you need to be sure how these perform. Last mile congestion is also one of the indicators that we have been looking at, and especially with respect to how networks are performing. And also not to forget the user behavior. That has changed as well. We have seen, for example, that nowadays, somewhere between 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., people are much more online doing all kinds of things. And before the pandemic, that was not basically the case. And we need not to forget that still we have 50% of the globe that is not connected. So everything that we're talking here, at least we are connected. So we need to find ways how we can help the other part of the world to get connected as well. If you look what we are doing at the Internet Society, basically we are focusing on two main areas. It's, let's say, what we call internet growth. So how we can get much more people connected to the internet. And on the other hand, not only to be connected, but to be connected in a secure way. So these are, let's say, the indicators that we are very much interested in. As all my colleagues already did mention, we have a lot of indicators from the global, let's say, indicators, but we need to make a deep dive in the Caribbean. And I think we should use experts such as Michelle Marius and others much more, because they know the region and they can help us to address real world challenges in order for policymakers and governments and other stakeholders to take sound decisions based on empirical data. So that's, I'll leave it for that for now, and maybe later on we can have a bit more discussion. Back to you, Bevan.
Thanks, Shannon, and thank you, Kevin and Albert as well. The various reports that each of my colleagues have shared, we're trying to collate the core information that exists in those reports to extract the Caribbean dimension of it. And we're calling it the State of the Caribbean Internet Report. And the hope is that we can come up with a quarterly publication that allows us to get snapshots and build ourselves slowly up to an annual publication that is a comprehensive look at what is happening in these different areas, from connectivity to infrastructure, to the state of the DNS, the security of our networks, all the way up, we hope as well, to the usage of internet tools and services and applications. And it's not just the organizations represented here, ARIN, LACNIC, ISOC, and ICANN. We're doing this in close collaboration with our colleagues and friends at the CTU, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, and with the team at CaribNOG. Only earlier this year, CaribNOG designated for the first time a dedicated research director in the person of Ms. Claire Craig, or Dr. Claire Craig. And Claire has been working with Junior McIntyre at the CTU to put together a framework for measuring the state and health of internet exchange points in the Caribbean, for example. Kevin Swift and I have been looking at how we can collate the RIR reports, which look essentially at number, resource allocations and requests and utilization. By industry, how number resources are being used across the region. And in each case, it is a composite view that gives us a full picture of the health and well-being or welfare of the Caribbean networks. So security has to be combined with infrastructure, has to be combined with application, has to be combined with connectivity, has to be combined with affordability for us to really get a sense of what are we doing and what is the return on the considerable investment that we're seeing across the region for digital technologies. So this initiative is targeted at establishing a measurement framework for the state of connectivity, data collection, verification of data, and the publication of connectivity data across the region. It would include key indicators for internet number resource allocations, internet infrastructure deployments, fixed and mobile network status, technologies in use, the quality and connection, if desired by Caribbean states, also price and statistics, so we can get a sense of affordability of communication services across the region. You would have heard, and we continue to talk about the issue of meaningful connectivity in the region. We don't just want to see where persons have access to the internet. We also want to understand what's the quality of that internet access. How affordable is it? Who are the groups that are still being left out? Where are the vulnerable points in our society and on our networks? And so I want to share with you just one snapshot of the approach being taken in the short term, so you get a sense of where we're going. You see the project, as I said, is going to be taken in several stages, and it will build upon the work already being done in the space, where we have field work, getting a firm sense of the status quo, looking at the definition of the metrics that we want to pull together, measuring, developing the measurement framework, looking at different data collection methods through surveys, and in the case of the RIRs, drilling into existing reports and data collection initiatives, the process that will help us clean up, and of course, analysis and publication, so that this information is shared as widely as possible with stakeholders across the region. Now, we expect the experience in different jurisdictions has already taught us that the publication of this data is going to be an important aspect in driving network investments, political and policy decisions, and of course, targeting areas for improvement of the quality of communication services. So what we're looking to do is take the collected information and make it available in an open, accessible portal that will allow us all to build on, analyze, critique, take advantage of the available information as it is being gathered. The RIRs have already given a commitment to and a willingness to assist in the development of this online tool and these online tools for interrogating the data. But we believe such a tool will also be a significant resource for policymakers and researchers. Should not mention the work that Michelle Maris has been doing. And I know she would be quite pleased if she had greater access to more live data or more consistently updated information to help with some of the reports that she has been putting out. And that's what we're looking to do with this initiative. We're looking to create a persistent forum for accessing relevant information on the state of Caribbean internet development. With that, let's open the floor for comments from my colleagues, but also from participants. If you have questions for us, or if any of my colleagues here want to add anything additional to what has been said, so we can have a...
Just quickly, Bevel, I just posted in the chat a link to the ICANN Open Data Initiative. So this is a project which has been, in test flight for some time now. So participants can take a look at the link and see what the project is all about and how they can take advantage of it.
Okay. Nigel or Rodney, if you're still around, any further input on the work that the CTU is doing in this regard to build out this report?
I I don't have, just now, let me just check my video here. Okay, yes. Yeah. Nothing too specific to add with respect to the work that we are doing in that regard in terms of the developing, new data products, or just because we really still figuring out, what's within our capacity and defining really what our steps would be. I had a question though in terms of what you all have described, because the data sources you're talking about typically are within your organizations and so on, and massaging them. But it's talking about measuring connectivity as well. So I'm wondering, based on what you all have said there, is there some role for data from, and I'm going to say a bad word in internet circles here, from the ITU? Because they, I know, they also keep statistics related to ICT development generally. And as we were looking at the thing just now, the policy framework document, one priority area is still basic infrastructure for connectivity, right? So I'm thinking the internet orgs might be able to report on everything in terms of the internet itself, but will they have data related to penetration, stuff like that? So if we're looking at the state of the internet in the Caribbean, is that an aspect that is currently captured within what you all have described so far?
Right, Shannon. Yes, I would like to take this one. And let me first start with your comments with respect to the ITU. Let me be clear that ITU is not an enemy. So there is a thing called the internet ecosystem, and you have several players. Each one of them play a significant role in the development. And if you look at what we call the 3 operational layer of the internet, first of all, you need to have a telecommunication infrastructure, be it wired, wireless, satellite communication. That's not important. You need to have a telecommunication infrastructure. And most of the telecommunications standards are being developed by the ITU-T. So there is nothing wrong with that. And then when we go to the next level, there we have our friends like Albert Daniel with domain name system. And finally, we have all the applications that we're using. So each one of us have a particular role, and it's not about enemy. So I just like to be clear. I've heard that as well, but that's not the case. And we do have friends all around the Caribbean and also around the globe. So it's very important that we are aware of that particular distinction, because then we know where we should go if we have a given problem or challenge or whatever. If I have an issue with a domain name, I would not go to Bevel, because I know that that's something that basically Albert is dealing with. And the same thing with internet-related standards. Then you would come to the Internet Engineering Task Force, of which society is the organization home. So let's be clear on that, so that we are among friends, and each one of us should focus on how we can make the Caribbean better, and it's not a battle between organizations.
Let me quickly jump in and support my friend, okay? Because one of the advantages of COVID is that everything now is recorded and kept in posterity. So I would not want it to be said, that the representative of ICANN, shared this view, which was proposed by some other member of the panel. So I agree with Shannon. We are in an internet ecosystem, and this is part of the reason. This is an example of where we have the IORGs here. Each of us has a specific role, and the fundamental point, as we said in the opening ceremony this morning, is that we work together. From the perspective of data, I mean, once data is empirical and it is accurate, it has no political affiliation and it has no religious persuasion. So we use the data on its merit. So whatever the source, once we can confirm that it is authentic and the data is accurate, I see no reason why we should exclude any data set from an analysis that would benefit our Caribbean.
Right. I want to add to that as well. I think, yeah, and I think in Nigel's question, there's a matter that has to be addressed, and that is the timeliness of information. And I know because we are all colleagues and we have sight into some of the data collection processes, even at the ITU, we know that there's always been a challenge in getting timely information, not just from the Caribbean, but from around the world. And the timeliness of that data that is collected impacts the quality of the reports that are produced. And so what I heard inherent in the question is, can we, inside of the collaboration that we are proposing and that we have initiated, can we improve or accelerate the timeliness of the information that we gather and that we produce reports on? And I think in that regard, Nigel, what we are proposing here would actually help with data collection across the region, which will in turn help our colleagues at the ITU for the parts of the internet landscape that they are trying to map and trying to analyze. Because the issue here is, once we give this, the commitment that we are describing, once it has this broad multi-stakeholder support, we have a much greater chance of moving beyond some of the impediments I described earlier. It is difficult to collect data about what is going on at a national level and at a sectoral level in the region for all kinds of reasons. But what we're hoping to do here is provide, to the extent that we can, based on existing reports that we are all responsible for, we provide a tangible expression of the value of timely, relevant data sets to Caribbean decision making, with the hope that it will break some of these long-standing issues around withholding information or protecting domains that are needed or that are required to be opened if we have to have this more comprehensive picture that we're talking about. And I think that's an important thing to flag inside of the conversation, because as Shernan and Albert indicated, we are all here working toward the same common ultimate good. And that requires us to break past some of these restrictions and some of these silos that would have meant that this information is for this area and this information is for that area. And that's why we're looking at the naming of this initiative as the State of the Caribbean Internet, knowing that there is no such thing as a Caribbean Internet. And I know Shernan and have conversations about this, but there are networks in the Caribbean that attach to the global internet. And that's what we mean when we say the Caribbean Internet. Those networks that have a part to play in the overall stability, openness, and security of the global internet. And we want to know what the future goes on.
The aspect that I was getting at, though, is if we generally talk about the state of the Caribbean internet, to me, part of that state is, what is the status of service penetration?
Correct.
Okay? And I don't know if that is among the things you all are currently measuring among the internet orgs.
No, we are not among the internet orgs, but that is why I mentioned the work of Caribnog and CARPIF, and you mentioned ITU, because those groups are looking at it. Was it Albert or Kevin mentioned the Atlas probes, which all give us a sense of reporting that does not come, for example, from the commercial internet service providers. The quality of the internet service, where are the dead or weak spots? Where are the under or unserved groups? And these are reports that we need not just as IORGs or as internet end users, but as government and policymakers, as regulators. And the more sources we have to the information, the more trustworthy the information can be. And that's what we're hoping to really catalyze inside of this process. That the actors that have been underfunded, and I want Kevin to speak a bit about the FRIDA grant program, the AREN as a community grant program, all designed to encourage more indigenous or local research in these areas. So for the gaps that we have in terms of what the institutions collect and gather, we're hoping that the community mobilizes itself and starts tackling some of the other blind spots as it relates to what is the state of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Do we have any in the chat? All right. So Kevin, you want to give a bit of insight into the FRIDA grant program?
Just before that, there was a comment from Patrick Hussein. He was saying in terms of availability, we in the Caribbean have a potential isolation issue, and he gave a link. So I'm not sure the particular context that was posted in, but just that's one chat that I saw.
Internet Resilience in Small Island States report. 2019 report. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep. And then we could wrap.
Okay, so just to briefly talk about FRIDA. FRIDA is a regional fund for digital innovation within Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a fund that has been managed by LACNIC for quite some while, since about 2008. Initially, it was funded by something called the Seed Alliance, which was a conglomeration of 3 RIRs managing pooled resources from other global entities. So you have had some technical actors and some commercial actors putting together money in a pool to fund these particular projects. And of course, stripping away any sort of entitlements in terms of endorsements and the like, because they were actually donations. But as of the last 2 years, LACNIC has been funding the FRIDA project directly from our own incomes. Some of the issue areas that we fund under FRIDA include right now internet stability and security, free and open access, and of course free and open internet and internet access. It's a program with 3 modalities. One which deals with FRIDA awards, which is recognition of existing initiatives as they stand. There's also the awards for grants when you have a proof of concept that you like to formalize. And of course, scale-up awards that you may have for an existing and successful project that you like to adjust the parameters, the scale, some of the other considerations in there for FRIDA. I think it's important to note that we have at least one FRIDA awardee here on this Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, Dr. Kim Malalu, who back in the day had been awarded a grant for the M Fisheries project. There have been other types of projects across the Caribbean dealing with agriculture. There's one called Agriculture Net coming out of UE. There was one from Jamaica a couple of years back, and there's also one from Dominica just before the unfortunate hurricanes of 2018. 17. Oof, I advanced the hurricane year.
Yeah.
Addressing a deployment of an Internet of Things scheme to track weather patterns. So it was quite a relevant topic that had been disrupted by the very issue that it tended to track. So there's a lot of potential through this fund. The cycle for the fund happens once a year, but again, as Beverly is mentioning, it'll be useful that if Caribbean actors were to tap into opportunities like these to be able to develop on a recurrent basis what could be complementary to what we see as a measurement for Caribbean development and what we can use to actually track and stimulate its development.
Yeah. Remind me, Bevel, did you mention the time frame that you hope to get the Internet by Numbers thing off the ground?
Kevin and I are looking at an initial report at the end of this year that just consolidates existing RIR information on number of resource allocations. And so we want that as our first output while we work on that larger scheme that blueprint that I put up on screen. Right, but the first thing we have to do before the end of this year is to give a consolidated picture of number of resource allocations, requests, and utilization across the Caribbean territories. And that means LACNIC and ARIN members together. Yeah. Right. And then the last thing I wanted to share on would have been the ARIN Community Grant Program, which was launched in 2019 to provide financial grants in support of initiatives, including research projects that improve the overall internet industry and internet user environment. Now, these grants by ARIN support qualified operational and research projects that broadly benefit the internet community within the RN service region. Caribnog was a recipient of one such grant, and that grant is being used now to conduct the IXP research project that I mentioned earlier. In 2021, this year, the program had a budget of $40,000 US, and successful applicants, program is now closed for this year, but successful applicants would have received, will be receiving grants between $1,000 and $15,000 US. So I think this is an important opportunity for those interested in specific areas of research to draft a project proposal and submit it either to LACNIC, FRIDA, or the RN Community Grant Program. And Shunan may be aware of other opportunities for grant funding that might exist inside of the ISOC ecosystem. But this is what is available to us now, and this is what we are saying, in addition to the work being conducted by the internet organizations and by the CTU, that individuals and community-based groups can also avail themselves of available funds to do local or sub-regional or even regional projects that benefit the internet and that give us a better sense of the state of the Caribbean internet. I'll hand back over to you and thank my colleagues, Kevin, Albert, Shunan, and those who would have asked questions online for the time. And we hope this has been a useful session, that you get a sense and that you've gotten a sense of what we are doing together to continue building and advancing the internet in the Caribbean.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bevel. I think that was quite an informative session and actually encouraging as well to see the level of collaboration taking place, and in particular here in the Caribbean between ARIN and LACNIC. I mean, CTU has been, I guess a partner of both organizations over all the years that I've been associated with the CTU. But even now, I think the partnership is growing closer among the three organizations, and I think that the Caribbean generally will benefit from it. Okay, so that takes us into our last item here, which is like general discussion summary of issues. I'll just do a quick, a general discussion first. I'll offer the opportunity for anyone to make a comment on anything that has happened today. We basically started with the introductory remarks, and then we had the liaison reports from Trinidad and Tobago, from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, from the UN, IGF. We heard about we heard about attempts, work by the Dynamic Coalition on SIDS, and also the plan to introduce a LAC space into the UN IGF. Multiple aspects of the UN IGF, youth initiatives, the opportunity to nominate persons for the next session of the multi-stakeholder advisory team for the UN IGF. We had we heard about data for good from Facebook this afternoon, and we saw examples whereby it has been applied in very recent times here in the Caribbean, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and in Haiti for disaster relief. We started looking at the particular section 3 of our policy framework document, and I think have a better appreciation of the magnitude of the work required to quickly amend or update it in a reasonable time frame. I think we still would like to see some, or at least that undertaken and possibly completed by early next year. And we had this last workshop session here where the internet organizations discussed joint plans to improve the reporting of the state of the Caribbean internet on an ongoing basis using hard data that they can possibly glean initially from existing reports and then grow further from there. I can pause at this point then for anyone to make any comment on any of those things that we went through today, or to ask any questions. And I'm pausing. I'm not noticing any hands going up. We are at the proposed end of day time. I would give Rodney any last opportunity if he wants to say any words. I'm not sure if he's on actually.
Yes, I'm on. I've been on.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm fine. You've summed it up nicely, and I am looking forward to tomorrow's session and discussion there, as well as to contributing to the wrap-up session tomorrow.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I just in terms of and I constantly check the participants list, and my constant my mantra is that I want to see wider and broader participation when we have forums like these. And I think part of what our strategy has to consider how we can engage, we can bring those individuals in. And when I was with the Barbados chapter, I see June Paris is on from Barbados. Hi, June. But there were persons who we saw showing up who were not traditional in the traditional space, and they actually really lent a lot to the discussion because they were coming from a completely different perspective. So I think we need to look at strategies and how we can broaden that participation. I would just say that for day one.
All right, thank you very much. And in fact, persons can think about that, and the open mic session tomorrow would be a good opportunity for us to hear comments in that regard and maybe start some discussions or identify strategies, as it were, to broaden the attendance and participation going forward. It was mentioned about tomorrow. So tomorrow we start again at 9 a.m. and we have some quite interesting sessions tomorrow. We talked about connectivity today, and we'll be having a deep dive into the topics of affordable and meaningful connectivity tomorrow with the help of our friends from the Alliance for Affordable Internet. And we'll also be having an in-depth discussion, I would say, on foundational digital IDs, whereby we will be getting experiences from different Caribbean territories as regards implementing plans and implementation experiences for digital ID systems. On the schedule, we have St. Lucia, the OECS, and Barbados. And we've also invited others to join the audience. We've invited Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. So while we might have certain presenters, all would have the opportunity to contribute to that discussion. And the objective there would be to basically identify common approaches and maybe common systems that we can use, common collaborations, all in the sense or in the context of us creating a single ICT space going forward. So I think those two sessions in the morning are particularly interesting, and in the afternoon, we'll be looking at, again, another view of what the orgs are doing, and we'll end up with our open mic. So it should be quite another good day tomorrow, and you're invited to join us promptly at 9 a.m. for that session. So thanks to all for participating, all our speakers and all our participants who endured the day. I hope it was enjoyable and informative, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9. Thank you. See you then.
Thanks, Nigel.
Okay.
Thanks.
Nigel, well done. Great day one. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye, everybody. Good job.
Bye. Okay. All right, I'm leaving now.